A horrific murder terrifies a community in New York.
I'd never seen anything as gruesome as this. The way the body was hacked up.
We didn't have hands where we could run fingerprints, and we didn't have a head.
What type of monster would do this?
Investigators quickly realize the details of the crime are disturbingly familiar.
We did have a serial killer that had dumped numerous bodies on Long Island.
That person had found an arm in his hedges in his front yard.
The next day, another arm is found about a half a mile away.
People were very nervous.
We're basically following a trail of body parts.
When detectives unravel the mystery, they find a killer who'd do anything to protect her secrets.
She doesn't know that I will chop her up and feed her to the dogs.
She just walked through neighborhoods tossing body parts.
That takes a void in your heart, or your soul, to do something like that, if you ask me.
It was just pure, unadulterated evil.
July 8th, 2014. In Bayshore, New York, two construction workers are taking a shortcut to the ferry through a wooded lot when they make a gruesome discovery.
As they were walking on the path, they came upon a female torso.
The body doesn't have a head. It doesn't have arms. And the legs have been removed from below the knee.
The horrified men immediately call 911. Homicide detectives rush to the scene.
My first impressions when I saw the body was, what type of monster would do this?
The torso was almost face down, maybe leaning a little bit to its right side, and had a pair of shorts on and a bra.
Never seen anything as gruesome as this. The way the body was hacked up.
There wasn't any blood around the body, so, okay, looks like this body was dumped here.
The body was in fairly good condition, meaning it hadn't been dumped there a long time ago. Especially, we're talking about a July day where it was 80 degrees that morning. The decomposition would go rapidly.
With only a dismembered torso, determining the victim's identity proves to be difficult.
We didn't have hands where we could run fingerprints. We didn't have a head. So it's very important to make sure you have everything documented well. Within close proximity, there were some bungee cords that, seemed out of place. Those bungee cords were recovered. But then it was discovered that the legs were just maybe 20 feet west of the body. They were hacked off. And like I said, on the leg, you could see the tattoos.
One of them said angel, and the other one looked like a GT on the opposite leg.
Investigators photograph the tattoos and enlist the aid of the media to find who they belong to.
As you can imagine, every media outlet was covering this story, including ours. It's not every day you cover a murder like this.
The following morning, they receive a tip from halfway around the world.
Police get a call from a man, Dale Brown, all the way from Guyana. He thinks that the body parts found may be that of his wife, Chanel.
Dale Brown says Chanel has been living and working in the United States while they made plans for him and their children to join her.
We decided that, she would go until we understand the whole immigration process, how the family could be together. We try to do the check-in in the morning and in the night kind of thing with the children.
Dale tells police the last time he spoke to Chanel was on the morning of July 5th.
I was calling her and I wasn't getting on to her. And I sent a few text messages and they were unanswered.
When detectives ask Dale if Chanel has any distinguishing marks, he says she does.
Dale tells detectives Chanel has 3 tattoos, one on each leg. One says CT, the other says Angel, and one on her arm that has her name, Chanel.
Upon looking more closely at the tattoo that was on one of the legs, it could have been a CT. He sent me pictures, and at that point, it looked like we had a tentative ID.
He confirmed it's my wife. That sadness, it was so thick. It's like the air just changed.
Chanel Thompson was born November 6, 1986, in the country of Guyana.
Beautiful Guyana. We're the only English-speaking country on the continent of South America. So Chanel grew up in Cumberland, Berbice. That's in the countryside. The culture in those communities, it's all about family.
Everyone is very social with each other. Everybody know everybody.
Chanel was very friendly, very affectionate.
She had a wonderful upbringing. And even though she had a great life there, there's always kind of this dream for people in the Caribbean that they want to come to America.
Chanel's father worked hard to give the family a chance to make their American dreams come true.
When he migrated to the U.S., he made sure all his children would ultimately join him.
Chanel was 19 and still waiting for her turn to go when she met the man who would keep her heart in Guyana.
I was with some friends at a popular creek. I saw her smiling at me, right? And I went across and I asked, I said, is this seat taken, right? Well, the seat had water. So she said no, and I go and sit down in the water right there. She laughed. I didn't even see the water, to be honest, right? I just saw her. We were young, trying to get ourselves established. I loved her approach to life. She was very smart. She always challenged my thinking, and she knew how to make me laugh.
Within a year of dating, Dale and Chanel found out she was pregnant.
We knew that we started this journey together, that we're in this together, and the only right thing to do is to get married. So I proposed, and we got married in Guyana at the church that we attended together. Yeah, I remember that day. It was a good day.
Soon after the birth of their daughter, Gabrielle, Chanel's father sent word that her visa had been approved.
Once you get that visa, you have to travel at a certain time. We had to make the difficult decision for her to go, and Gabrielle would stay with me. We didn't want the opportunity to be lost. Her father said she needs to stay and have a stable job here in the U.S.
For the next several years, Chanel traveled between the two countries and gave birth to 3 more children.
She moved to New York, where she stayed with her sisters. Meanwhile, Dale remained in Guyana, where he cared for their 4 children.
Her ambitions were tied to family goals, and it was tied to her children and the life that she wanted to have for them.
Daddy always tells her that she only wanted the best for us.
In 2013, they began making plans for Dale and the children to join her.
We kind of mapped out, what needed to be done to immigrate to the U.S. It's such a lengthy process,
But the long-awaited family reunion would never take place. Instead, Chanel has become the victim of a horrific murder, and Suffolk County Police are trying to determine why.
This body being dismembered, just this level of viciousness that comes to mind. Who would do something like this?
To residents of the waterfront community, the details of the murder are alarmingly familiar.
Just 3 years ago, when we had these same headlines coming out about the Gilgo Beach murders and body parts being found.
We did have a serial killer that had dumped numerous bodies on Long Island.
But it was obviously a consideration of ours whether there's any connection to Gilgo.
Coming up, more body parts turn up.
A person had found what appeared to be an arm in his hedges in his front yard.
Detectives must act quickly to determine if a serial killer has struck again.
They discover one body, then another body, and then all of a sudden we have 4 bodies that turn up.
The murder and dismemberment of Chanel Brown bears the hallmarks of the unidentified Gilgo Beach serial killer. Searching for clues, detectives review the case files of the previous Gilgo victims.
It all started actually during an investigation looking for this girl who had gone missing. In the course of trying to locate her, we started coming across bodies. And they discover one body, then another body, and then all of a sudden we have 4 bodies that turn up.
2010 to 2011, police began finding more and more body parts near Gilgo Beach, mainly sex workers, women in their 20s. So when Chanel was killed, that brought that all back up.
Though it's been 3 years since the Gilgo Beach crimes, search teams sweep the area for Chanel's remains. But a call from a neighboring county redirects the investigation.
The day after the discovery of the body, I was tasked to go to Hempstead, where a call had been made that a person had found what appeared to be an arm in his hedges in his front yard. He believed it to be that of a female because her fingernails were long.
The arm lacks distinguishing features, so detectives are unable to confirm it belongs to Chanel Thompson Brown.
The next day, another arm is found about a half a mile away. It's an arm that has a manicure that matches the manicure from the first.
And we could connect that almost immediately to Chanel because the arm that was found had a tattoo with her name on it.
You can imagine in that neighborhood, the fear, people wondering what is going on.
But the more investigators analyze the Gilgo Beach serial killer, the less they believe Chanel is his latest victim.
When looking at the body, it appeared to have been hacked brutally, not with precision, but in haste and quite violent. I would not think a serial killer would do this. He'd be a little bit more careful.
The 2 limbs were also found outside the killer's usual dumping grounds.
It just didn't appear, due to several factors, that this was related to Gilgo Beach.
They had to actually put out a press release to tell people, no, we do not believe this is the Gilgo Beach killer. We do not believe that this is happening again.
The official announcement does little to calm area residents, and police are now left with the possibility of a copycat.
People were very nervous. The department was under a lot of pressure. But I'm going to be honest with you, we're so focused on our investigation that we kind of block out the outside noise and focus on what we have to do.
As of July 10th, now we had the torso, both legs, and both arms. And the only substantial part of the body that we were missing was the head.
We're basically following a trail of body parts.
With little indication as to who might have killed Chanel, detectives look to the autopsy for new leads.
During the autopsy, it was discovered that she had 39 stab wounds to her body.
With those type of injuries, my first thought is this is up close and personal. There's rage there. There's passion there. I feel at first glance, this victim knew who the perpetrator was.
Investigators contact Chanel's husband, Dale Brown, for a more complete victimology. Dale tells them that for the past year, she'd been working for a large Manhattan department store.
Chanel loved her job, and if she could have worked overtime to make an extra dollar, she did that.
She wasn't a person that went out partying at all. She was more or less a homebody.
With her busy schedule, Chanel's only social outlet were the people she worked with. Dale says she became friends with a woman named Leah Cuevas.
Leah, she was pretty friendly. She was bubbly, I would say. She always had a Bible with her, and that I saw. She was just a fun person.
She was also from an immigrant background. She was Trinidadian and Chanel was from Guyana. So they had that connection between them and it formed a bond.
Her husband is Dominican and he owned the bodega in the neighborhood.
They had this life that they were building together. And of course, you can imagine that Chanel was ultimately looking for that for her and Dale and their children.
Leah understood the struggles of immigrant life and offered to help by renting Chanel a room in her Brooklyn brownstone at a discount.
She was paying about $400 for rent, and which included utilities. $400 for rent. I mean, that's unheard of. That is a deal that no one would ever want to pass up in New York, where rents are so high.
Leah was offered the opportunity, and she jumped on it.
Leah lived in the same building, just downstairs. This caused the two of them to grow really close.
But Dale says something changed shortly before Chanel was killed.
The day before she was murdered, she told me that there was an incident with her, an argument with her and Leah, and that she wanted to move. But she didn't share much in terms of the details.
Investigators traveled to the Brooklyn apartment building where Chanel and Leah both lived. Leah isn't there, so they speak to some of the other residents.
She lived on the second floor of a brownstone. Leah Cuevas lived downstairs from her. And there was another couple that rented down the hallway from her, a Jamaican couple.
I located the couple that she resided with on the second floor apartment regarding what took place over the past weekend.
Witnesses say that Leah and Chanel, they had an argument so huge that police were called.
Then it was discovered that Leah Cuevas was posing as if she owned the building and charging people rent, and it came out that she didn't own it.
And at this point, Leah Cuevas was looking as our number one suspect at that time.
July 10th, 2014. 2 days into the investigation, detectives have their first substantial lead in the brutal murder and dismemberment of Chanel Brown. According to the couple who lives down the hall, trouble had been brewing for some time between Chanel and Leah Cuevas.
I learned that initially Chanel had rented a room with the belief that Leah was the landlord or owner of the property.
Apparently, Leah Cuevas was not the landlord and had no right to receive any payments or monies.
The neighbors say they knew Leah was cheating them, but didn't know details about the situation and agreed not to tell Chanel under duress.
Leah Cuevas, we learned, also had control over the other tenants in the building. The one source of electric ran through her apartment. So at any given time, if she was mad, she had the power to just unplug that electricity.
But when Leah began to demand more money, they changed their minds.
He refused to pay, and Leah kept on harping on it. And at that point, the neighbors disclosed to Chanel that Leah was not the property owner.
She also found out that she was being charged more than the other people in the building because she was the only one who didn't know.
When Chanel learned of this information, she was mortified because she was wondering how could a friend of mine, a supposed friend, take such advantage of her.
The neighbors say Chanel couldn't afford to move out immediately, so for the next 2 weeks she kept the upsetting revelation to herself. But on the 4th of July, Leah pushed her to the breaking point when she shut off the electricity.
The power was shut off in the residence, and Chanel got upset because she was getting ready to go to work. So she wound up getting into an argument with Leah.
Chanel was accusing Leah of scamming her, of taking advantage of her, telling her that she knew that she wasn't the landlord.
Upstairs, the other tenants listened as the fight escalated.
Chanel and Leah were so close at one time that they shared intimate details about their lives. Leah shared with Chanel that she had an affair with another man. This apparently was brought up in front of Leah's husband.
Leah became enraged.
Leah was out of control and yelling obscenities and just threatening her left and right.
It got heated to the point where the New York City Police Department had to be called. And once they arrived, they were separated and the situation was resolved for the day.
At that point, Chanel left and went to work, but Leah wasn't done with her.
The neighbors tell detectives that the fight continued the next day.
They said that they were coming home, walking down the block. They saw Chanel walking towards the residence with their shopping cart with her laundry in it.
Later, when they got inside, they saw her laundry cart and her slippers in front of Leah's door. They also heard yelling as they were going upstairs.
They overheard Chanel basically screaming in a scared voice, saying, oh no, I'm sorry. And then they heard what sounded like a physical altercation. And then after several minutes, it went quiet.
When the neighbors went out later that day, they saw something strange.
They say they no longer saw Chanel's slippers or the laundry cart. What they did see was Leah mopping the floor with what smelled like bleach.
Based upon the information, we were able to obtain a search warrant for the residence. Blood was found in the hallway, just inside the front door. And then also in the front living room, there were a couple of empty bleach bottles, rubber gloves, a carpet cleaner, and odor eliminator products that were located in the garbage cans in front of the house.
Although it's clear Leah attempted to get rid of evidence, the scene is not consistent with what detectives know happened to Chanel.
Chanel was stabbed 39 times. That will cause a lot of blood. Plus, the dismemberment of a body would cause additional blood. To find what we found didn't make sense.
Police know that Leah is likely the last person who saw Chanel alive, so speaking to her is top priority.
Leah showed up at the local precinct. She was looking to speak to somebody to clear her name because she had heard that the police had been at her house.
Leah is adamant that she is the owner of the building and says she has the paperwork to prove it. She also tells police that she didn't kill Chanel and that the two of them were friends.
Due to the highly publicized nature of the crime, investigators decide to confront Leah with everything they know. Surprisingly, she acknowledges the recent fight.
She admitted she was pissed off at Chanel because Chanel was basically putting her business out there, especially in front of her husband.
She was quite proud that she beat her up. And yes, there could be a little blood in the apartment from that fight.
But according to Leah, Chanel was very much alive afterward.
Leah stated that she left on her own accord and she left with some Jamaican man, intimating that she may have a relationship with this man.
She also tells police that she was having affairs and was basically running around town, and that if anything happened to her, that it was likely that Jamaican man that she left with. Leah is adamant that Chanel wasn't this good girl that everybody makes her out to be.
Coming up, security cameras provide a glimpse of Chanel just before she disappeared.
She's seen leaving the laundromat and heading in the direction of her residence.
And investigators zero in on a cold-blooded killer.
This was the moment that the media was waiting for, that someone had been arrested in Chanel Brown's killing.
After concluding their interview with Leah Cuevas, police begin searching for Chanel's alleged lover. If what Leah told them is true, he was the last person to see Chanel alive.
Family members were interviewed. People in the building were interviewed. Coworkers were interviewed.
They all had the same story, that she was a devoted wife and mother who worked hard, and that her only goal was to bring her family to the U.S.
While those close to Chanel insist she was faithful, they say she did have a male friend she might have asked to help her move.
The only Jamaican male that they knew that Chanel would be in contact with was a gentleman who was a taxi driver who would regularly give her rides. I was able to track him down, and he offered some compelling information.
The Jamaican cab driver says he and Chanel were strictly platonic.
He said on the morning of July 5th, the day that Chanel went missing, Chanel told him that she was going to do laundry later in the afternoon, and then she was going to go to the mall, and she wanted the driver to pick her up when she was done. He tried to call her between 8:30 and 9 o'clock that night and got no answer. A couple hours later, he got a response back saying, "I'm in the hospital with a friend." And that was the last contact that he had whatsoever with Chanel or her phone.
The message suggests Chanel could have left as Leah claimed, but detectives can't locate anyone who saw Chanel after July 5th. To establish a timeline of Chanel's movements, detectives ask nearby businesses for security footage.
Video was recovered from a laundromat right down the street from where Chanel lived.
She's seen leaving the laundromat with the shopping cart, heading in the direction of her residence, which was only about a block away. What was interesting is that the clothing that Chanel was wearing in the video was the same clothing that was discovered with her dismembered body.
Contrary to Leah's story, there is no evidence of Chanel ever leaving the apartment again.
We had a sense that Leah Cuevas was indeed our perpetrator, but now we had to prove it. In the ensuing days after the arm was found, detectives had responded once again to the Hempstead area.
The owner of the home saw blue jays picking at something inside the hedgerow. It turned out to be the victim's head.
When the head was discarded, it was discarded in hedges, so it never made it to the ground. So the head never had an opportunity to get decomposed that you would think it would. I've seen a lot of things, but it takes a void in your heart or your soul to do something like that.
Although the gruesome discovery lends another piece of evidence, it leaves lingering questions.
We still weren't 100% sure where this crime had occurred. We knew the argument was, in fact, in Leah Cuevas' apartment, but we didn't recover a lot of blood.
At this point, police are able to pull Leah's cell phone records, and practically every single body part matched up to her locations.
On July 6th, Leah's cell phone was located in the town of Hempstead, where the arms and head had been discovered. And it's hitting off of a cell phone tower right next to the Hempstead train station.
In that vicinity is the Long Island Railroad, which is a major artery to get to and from New York City.
Police are stunned by the possibility that a killer used public transit to dispose of a dismembered body.
We believe she got off the train and just walked through neighborhoods and tossing body parts in different locations.
It's kind of one of those things that makes you wonder, this couldn't be something that just a normal person would do, right? This had to be the work of someone more sinister.
Leah was under the illusion that she had committed the perfect crime and the perfect cover-up. I was convinced that it was the devil himself, through her, using her to do this.
After 2 weeks of investigation, Bayshore detectives have used phone records to connect Leah Cuevas to the murder and dismemberment of Chanel Brown.
On July 23rd of 2014, Leah Cuevas was arrested and charged with murder in second degree.
This was the moment that the media was waiting for, made headlines. It was all over the news.
Leah exercises her right to remain silent.
2 days after Leah's arrest was made, I receive a call, and it's from a taxi union official in New York City who tells me that he has a driver who may have pertinent information to Chanel's case.
So I asked my wife if she could turn the TV off, and she didn't hear me. So I turned around and got smacked in the face with Leah being brought into the police station. She was in handcuffs.
Ernesto says he remembers driving Leah to Long Island the day before Chanel's body was discovered.
I got the call about 7:35 in the morning on July 7th, where she was asking me what would it cost to take her to Brentwood.
He went to Brooklyn to pick Leah up. When Leah came to his car, she had a very large suitcase. It was so large and heavy that Ernesto had to help her place it in the car. He estimated it to weigh 80 to 100 pounds.
I asked her, jokingly, I said, "What do you have here, a body?" She didn't joke. She just said no, and then very stoic. She asked me if I knew of any pawn shop. Then she's like, "Just drive to the pawn shop, and then we'll guide from there."
Ernesto says that after taking her to the pawn shop, Leah directed him to Bayshore.
Eventually, they get to a house, and at that point, he helps Leah take the suitcase out of the trunk, and nobody was home at the time. And they leave the suitcase there and go back to the car.
We just returned to Brooklyn. But instead of dropping off at her house, she asked me to drop her off at the train station, which I did.
Ernesto says Leah was completely calm throughout the trip, but he recalls an unsettling moment.
She mentioned that she had an argument with her neighbor. And she doesn't know that I will chop her up and feed her to the dogs. I replied to her "Come on, Leah, that's not something you would do." How little did I know.
I happened to have worked there as a patrol officer many years earlier, so I was familiar with the area. And at that point, it seemed with the information that Ernesto was providing that they had gone to Elliott Street. So just on a hunch and reviewing Leah's cell phone records, there was a call made to a Fady Jacques who happened to live on Elliott Street. We knock on the door, I think it was a day or two later, and interview Fady Jacques.
Fayette says he and Leah are old friends and remembers getting a call from her on July 7th. The call was placed about an hour after Ernesto says he dropped Leah off at the Brooklyn train station.
Leah had asked him if he was home, and he told her that he was at work, that he worked at Home Depot. And she asked if he could pick up some bungee cords for her, at which time he did. That was significant because bungee cords fitting that description were at the scene of where those body parts were dumped.
Fayette says Leah was waiting for him when he got home. She had a large suitcase with her and asked him for a ride to Bayshore.
When he went upstairs to get the keys for the car, by the time he came outside, he notices that the bungee cords that he had just given Leah were tied around the suitcase. She directs him to a parking lot. They pull into the parking lot, and he assists her with taking the suitcase out of the trunk. He knows that her sister lives in the area, so he thinks that she's going to visit somebody. So he leaves, he said 10, 15 minutes later, he gets a call from Leah, and she's telling him to come back and pick me up. So he thought it was kind of odd.
Fayette says when he returned, the suitcase was gone.
He wound up taking Leah to the Brentwood Railroad Station so she could go back home.
Despite giving Leah a ride, Fayette had no knowledge of or involvement in the crime, so police let him go. After interviewing Fayette, detectives visit the pawn shop and discover further evidence of Leah's cover-up.
Leah had pawned some items of jewelry, in particular a ring. This was, it appears to have paid for the cab ride. That ring was eventually matched to belonging to our victim, Chanel Thompson Brown.
3 months after Leah's arrest, as prosecutors are preparing the case for trial, they receive a call from the rightful owner of Leah and Chanel's apartment building.
She was renovating that apartment, and she had pulled up a rug and noticed what appeared to be a bloodstain.
I made arrangements to have our identification section and crime lab come, and they cut out this section of the carpet and the padding. And eventually, once it was analyzed, it came back to being blood belonging to Chanel.
We had finally found our crime scene for a fact.
But you never know what a jury's going to do. There was no eyewitness to this. There was no confession. We have to connect all the dots, and we have to paint a picture for the jury of what happened here.
In December 2015, Leah Cuevas stands trial for the murder and dismemberment of Chanel Brown.
With these cases where you're dealing with circumstantial evidence, you're always concerned with, are you going to be able to paint a picture for the jury that is strong enough to convict someone of murder?
$400 a month for rent. It doesn't seem like enough to kill someone and to carry out such a vicious and just almost depraved act of chopping them up and then discarding their body parts.
The prosecution argues that it was a crime of passion.
Chanel brought up that Leah was being unfaithful to her husband, and she brought this up in front of Leah's husband.
The real reason that she snapped was because Chanel outed her.
It shamed her and infuriated her, and she took that out on Chanel when she had the next opportunity to.
It is one thing to, in the heat of the moment, to maybe stab somebody, but 39 times is crazy.
Prosecutors say Leah used both acquaintances and public transportation to distribute the dismembered body parts in various locations.
Think about if you were sitting next to her on the train. Takes a whole other level of evilness to dismember a body. And then to discard the body parts.
The defense attempts to undermine the prosecution's argument.
Maybe she wasn't on the train to dismember, to distribute body parts. Maybe she was going to the mall. Maybe she had a friend in Hempstead.
I know defense lawyers got their job to do. You got to defend the indefensible. But my God, it was preposterous to say the least.
On December 15th, the jury finds Leah Cuevas guilty. During the sentencing hearing, she finally takes the stand.
She showed no remorse. She basically was saying that we set her up.
She told the judge that she felt like a lamb being led to slaughter. Once she finished her mini tirade, the judge said to Leah, the only lamb being led to slaughter in this case was Chanel. And then he sentenced her to 25 years to life.
She got every year that she deserves.
She is sitting where she is right now because there's evidence of justice in this world.
It's unfathomable to think that somebody would be capable of doing what she did.
It was just pure, unadulterated evil. I mean, if you didn't think that evil exists, this epitomized it.
This story, when you really think about it, it's a woman who came to America in search of the American dream for her children and her husband. And in the end, now we have 4 children left without a mother.
She was more than this case, more than the gruesomeness that makes this case sensational. She was a loving, caring mother and wife, sister, aunt, human being.
Me doing my schoolwork and following something that I want to do and I'm passionate about is something that she would have been proud of. I feel like seeing the twins grow up and it's something that Mama would have wanted to see.
She loved her children, and I know she would be very proud of them and their achievements. Yes. She was a beautiful soul.
Just take it. He'd thank me for it. He'd frame it. That night, Albert didn't go to the bar with the other mechanics. He went to a Staples. He bought an all-in-one printer, a scanner, and a stack of paper. The total was less than $200. It was the cheapest investment in an empire the Secret Service would eventually call the most prolific digital operation in history. Chapter 2: The Laboratory of Illusions. The kitchen of Albert's small apartment became a sanctuary of light and chemicals. For months, the only sound was the rhythmic shick, shick, shick of the inkjet carriage moving back and forth. The smell of cooking food was replaced by the ozone of electronics and the sharp scent of industrial solvents. Albert sat hunched over a laptop, his eyes bloodshot and fixed on a high-resolution scan of a 2003 series $100 bill. He had realized early on that the Secret Service's greatest weapons were the security features embedded inside the paper. The watermark, the security thread, these weren't printed on top. They were part of the very DNA of the cloth. You can't print a ghost, he muttered to himself staring at a genuine $100 bill pinned to his wall like a biological specimen. Then the engineer in him woke up. If he couldn't put the features in the paper, he would build the paper around the features. He began experimenting with recycled newsprint thin, porous, and remarkably similar in feel to the cotton linen blend of U.S. currency once traded. Newsprint had the right flexibility, it just lacked the soul of money. He developed a sandwich method. It was elegant in its simplicity. He would print the front of the bill on one sheet and the back on another. Before gluing them together, he would print a faint, mirrored image of the watermark on the inside of the front sheet using a specialized light gray ink. He'd lay a thin, silver-colored thread meticulously stripped from a different material between the layers. When he glued them together and pressed them under a stack of heavy engineering textbooks for 48 hours, the result was staggering. When held to the light, the watermark appeared to be inside the bill, shimmering with a ghostly presence. The thread was visible, but shrouded, just like the real thing. But there was one final hurdle: the pen. Every retail clerk in America used the iodine-based detection pen. If the paper was wood-based, the iodine turned black. If it was cloth-based, it stayed gold. Albert spent weeks testing household chemicals. Bleach made the paper brittle. Starch made it smell like a laundry room. Vinegar ruined the ink. Then, one afternoon, he watched his girlfriend, Allison Sewell, getting ready for a night out. She sprayed a cloud of hairspray over her hair to lock it in place. Albert's eyes widened. A coating, a non-porous barrier. He waited until she left, then took a test bill into the bathroom. He sprayed a light mist of white rain hairspray over the paper. He let it dry, then swiped the detection pen across it. The line turned black. It had failed. He didn't give up. He went back to the store. He bought every brand. He tried a different brand, Aquanet. It was heavier, more industrial. He applied it in 3 micro layers, letting each one dry completely. He swiped the pen. The line stayed a bright, beautiful, honest orange. Albert Talton stood in his kitchen, surrounded by the smell of hairspray and ink, holding a bill that had cost him roughly 3 cents to manufacture. To the world, it was worth $100. It was the ultimate arbitrage. He didn't feel like a criminal. He felt like an alchemist who had finally found the formula to turn lead into gold. Chapter 3: The Chess Master and the Brokers. Albert knew that the downfall of every great counterfeiter was ego, the desire to spend the money themselves. He had seen it in prison. Men who got caught because they tried to buy a Rolex with a stack of bills that still smelled like wet ink. He was too smart for that. He needed a buffer. He needed a pyramid. He invited his old friend, David Goldberg, over for a game of chess. David was a man of routines, a man who appreciated the logic of the board and the safety of the shadows. Midway through the game, David's eyes drifted to the oven. Al, why the hell is there money in your oven? You trying to cook the books literally? Albert didn't look up from the board. It's drying. Dave, the glue needs to cure at exactly 105 degrees. High humidity today. David stood up, walked to the kitchen, and pulled out a tray of crisp, new hundreds. He touched one. He snapped it between his fingers. His eyes went wide. Is this? It's better than the real thing, Albert said, moving his knight to F3. And I'll pay you $60 an hour to help me bake it. We're going to be the most efficient bakery in California. Dave. David Goldberg didn't sit back down. He looked at the money, then at Albert. The logic of the chessboard had just been replaced by the logic of the hustle. He was in, but David was just the labor. Albert needed the brokers. He reached out to Paul McCory, his best friend since they were 17. Paul was the charismatic one, the man who could sell sand in the Sahara. Then there was Troy Stroud, a man Albert had met during his previous stint in the college prison. Troy was the bridge. He knew the gangs of Inglewood and Compton. He knew the men who weren't afraid of a little dirt. Albert laid out the rules in a quiet corner of a dimly lit bar the air thick with the smell of cheap beer and desperation. I sell to you for $15, Albert said, his voice a low rasp. You sell to your guys for 30. They sell to the street for 50. By the time that bill hits a cash register, it's 3 or 4 tiers away from me. No one knows my name. No one knows where I live. I'm a ghost in the machine. And the gangs, Paul asked, leaning in, they're loud. Al, they like to brag. Gangs are loyal to the product, Albert replied. They're used to moving weight. This is lighter than coke, easier to hide, and the profit margin is higher. Just tell them the golden rule. 1 bill at a time. Go to a big box store, Target, Walmart, Macy's, buy a pack of gum, a pair of socks, get $99 in real, government-backed change. It's the perfect wash. The system was elegant. It was a machine. Within 6 months, Albert moved out of his cramped apartment and into a comfortable townhouse in Lawndale. He stopped working at the body shop. He started buying things. First, it was the Mercedes, then another for the weekend, then the crown jewel, an Aston Martin, shimmering in the California sun like a silver bullet. He felt like James Bond if Bond had been raised in Inglewood and preferred printers to Walther P. Peaks. He bought a house for Allison in Woodland Hills. He bought 7 flat-screen TVs, 1 for every room, just because he could. He was living the American dream, but his version was printed at 1200 DPI on a recycled newsprint sandwich. Chapter 4, The Street Soldiers. While Albert sat in his air-conditioned townhouse, the money was bleeding into the streets. In the back alleys of South Central, the H to H38 notes became a new form of currency. Gang members who usually dealt in small bags of white powder found that Al's hundreds were a safer bet. You didn't get shot over a bad bill. You just got a dirty look from a cashier. Troy Stroud managed the distribution with the precision of a logistics officer. He met with gang leaders in the parking lots of fast food joints. Listen, Troy told a Young Bloods member known as T-Bone. You take this 100 to the Popeyes. You order a 3-piece. You give him the bill. They run the pen. It stays orange. They give you $85 in real ones. You bring me 30. You keep the rest. You do that 10 times a day. You're making $500 for eating chicken. You understand? T-Bone nodded, his eyes fixed on the stack of hundreds in Troy's glove box. What if they catch it? They won't, Troy said confidently. But if they do, you play dumb. You tell him you sold your rims to some guy in a parking lot and he paid you in cash. You're the victim. See, everyone loves a victim. The wash worked perfectly. The money spread like a virus. It hit the mom and pop stores first, the corner groceries, where the owners were too busy or too tired to look closely. Then it moved to the big chains. Target, Walmart, Macy's. They were losing hundreds of thousands every month. The losses weren't just numbers on a balance sheet. They were felt by the small business owners who realized at the end of a long week that their profit had been replaced by Albert's sandwich paper. But as Albert told his brokers, in this game, the person left holding the bill is the loser. And it's never going to be us. Chapter 5. The H-2H-3-8 Phantom. U.S. Secret Service, Los Angeles Field Office. Special Agent Christopher Toledo stared at a map of Los Angeles. It was covered in red pins, a digital pox that was spreading toward the suburbs. Each pin represented a hit, a counterfeit $100 bill that had been flagged by a bank. It's a bloodbath, Toledo muttered, rubbing his eyes. We're seeing these notes in all 50 states now. Someone just flagged one in a casino in Macau. Agent Matthew Mayo walked over, a thick file in hand. Mayo was an undercover specialist, a man who could blend into a crack house or a corporate boardroom with equal ease. The forensics came back from the specimen vault. It's the same scan, Chris, every single one. He laid out 3 bills. They looked identical. Look at the serial numbers. They vary. He's figured out how to randomize those. But look at the plate numbers on the bottom right. Toledo leaned in H2 and H38. On every single bill, Mayo said, "This guy is an engineer. He's built a perfect process, but he's arrogant. He hasn't bothered to change the source file for the plate markings in 3 years. To him, it's a manufacturing brand. He's not a traditional counterfeiter," Toledo mused. "No engraved plates, no offset presses. This is all digital, and it's clean. The feel is almost there. He's treating the paper with something that's fooling the pens. We're arresting the passers," Mayo said, his voice tight with frustration. "Small-time crooks. Kids looking for a quick buck. They all have the same story. I don't know where it came from. They're terrified. Chris, they talk about the printer like he's a god. We're only catching the crumbs. Then we stop looking at the crumbs," Toledo said, standing up. "If he's printing this much, he's buying supplies. He's buying ink by the gallon and paper by the mile. Let's start at the source." Chapter 6. The Staples Trail. The break didn't come from a high-speed chase or a dramatic shootout. It came from the mundane world of retail loyalty programs. The Secret Service began a massive audit of office supply stores across Southern California. They were looking for a specific pattern: bulk purchases of high-end inkjet cartridges, specifically the ones used in top-tier all-in-one printers. At a Staples in Lawndale, a young clerk named Marcus looked at the photos of the cartridges. "Yeah, I know that guy," Marcus said, pointing to a transaction record. "Comes in once a week. Buys for sometimes 6 of the high-yield blacks and colors. Always pays in cash." "Does he have a name?" Mayo asked. "He uses a rewards card," Marcus replied, tapping his screen. "Likes to save those 5% dividends. Name on the account is Albert Talton." Mayo and Toledo exchanged a look. They ran the name. The criminal record popped up like a flare in a dark sky. Bank fraud, forgery, grand theft, released in 2004. "He's local," Toledo said, staring at the address on the screen. "He's right under our noses in Lawndale." They didn't move in yet. They needed the whole network. They set up a sneak and peak warrant for Troy Stroud's residence. While Troy was out getting lunch, a professional locksmith hired by the service picked the lock in seconds. Mayo and a team of forensic experts moved through the house like ghosts. They didn't take anything. They just photographed. They found stacks of H to H3 bills hidden in a false bottom of a closet. They found Troy's ledger, a handwritten list of brokers and sold amounts. But most importantly, they followed Troy when he left his house. They watched his white Range Rover pull into the driveway of a townhouse in Lawndale. A man came out to meet him. The man was Albert Talton. Chapter 7, The Hotel Stakeout. The Secret Service rented a room at the hotel directly across from Albert's townhouse. For 16 hours a day, agents sat behind a high-powered telescope and a long-lens camera, documenting every movement. The room smelled of stale coffee and cold pizza. They saw Paul McCory arrive daily in his bright orange Mercedes, the vanity plate's a beacon of unearned wealth. They saw David Goldberg walk in every morning with his red backpack, looking like a middle-aged student heading to a library. And they saw Albert. Albert looked like the picture of suburban success. He washed his cars with a meticulousness that bordered on obsessive, his hands moving in perfect circles over the Aston Martin's hood. He was a man who loved his toys, and he had no idea that every time he polished his chrome, a high-definition lens was capturing the reflection of his own downfall. On April 30th, the surveillance team followed Albert and Paul to a warehouse called Paper Mart. They watched as the two men loaded 3 massive bales of newsprint into the car. The car sagged under the weight. Mayo went inside after they left, identifying himself to the manager. What did he buy? 3 bales of newsprint, custom cut, the manager said, handing over the receipt. He said he was starting a local newsletter. That's a lot of news, Mayo muttered. He did the math. That's enough paper to print $1 million in hundreds. He's not just filling orders anymore. He's preparing for a flood. The tension in the hotel room reached a breaking point. They could arrest him for the paper, but Albert was a veteran of the system. He'd claim he was an artist, a hobbyist. They needed to catch the sandwich in the making. They needed the ink to be wet. Chapter 8. The Fall of the Artisan. May 8th, 2008. The sun was just beginning to bake the asphalt of Lawndale when the tactical teams assembled in a nearby parking lot. Albert was inside. Surveillance confirmed that Goldberg and McQuarrie were also present. The H to H38 factory was humming. Agent Mayo stood in the hallway of the townhouse complex, his hand on the hilt of a battering ram. He could hear the faint sound of printers through the door, the rhythmic shick, shick, shick that had become Albert's heartbeat. Police! Search warrant! The door disintegrated. The raid was a blur of black tactical gear and shouted commands. Albert Talton was coming out of his bedroom, perhaps thinking about his next Mercedes. He found himself staring into the cold, dark eye of Mayo's service weapon. Down! Get down! Hands behind your head. Albert didn't fight. He didn't run. He moved to the carpet with a strange, eerie calmness. It was the movement of a man who had already played this scene out in his head 1,000 times. In the garage, hundreds of bills were hanging from lines like macabre laundry, drying in the stagnant air. In the office, a bank of 6 high-end printers were working in unison, spitting out sheets of $20 bills. On the computer screen, a high-resolution Benjamin Franklin stared back at the agents, his eyes seemingly mocking the situation. You caught us mid-batch. Goldberg sighed from the floor, his face pressed into the carpet. We were just about to finish the glue. Mayo walked through the house. He found nearly $162,000 in completed notes and over $1.4 million in partially completed sheets. It was a factory of dreams built on a foundation of hairspray and newsprint. Chapter 9. The Pride of the Forger. In the interrogation room, the fluorescent lights hung with a sterile intensity. Albert Talton sat uncuffed, a cup of lukewarm coffee in front of him. He didn't look like a broken man. He looked like a professor waiting to give a lecture. How did you do it, Albert? Mayo asked, leaning back. We've seen a lot of digital work. Most of it is garbage. Yours passed the Secret Service's own field tests. Albert smiled. It was a genuine, proud smile. The hairspray was the key. White rain was to thin. Aquanet. Aquanet has a polymer base. It creates a shell. It tricks the iodine. He spent the next 3 hours explaining the sandwich method, the mirrored watermarks, and the source of his newsprint. He spoke with the passion of a man who had finally found an audience that appreciated his genius. I made $7 million with a $200 printer, Albert said, his voice full of a perverted sense of accomplishment. Tell me, agent, does the Treasury have anyone who can do that? I'm the most efficient mint in the history of this country. The difference, Albert, Mayo replied, his voice cold, is that our money represents the faith and credit of the United States. Yours represents a trip to Staples and a felony. You're not an engineer. You're a thief with a good scanner. Albert's smile faltered for a second. He looked at his hands, the hands of a craftsman. It worked for 3 years. For 3 years, I was the biggest bank in Los Angeles. How many men can say that? Chapter 10, The Affront to the Bench. The trial in the U.S. federal courthouse was swift. The evidence was overwhelming the printers, the paper, the rewards card, and Albert's own proud confession. Assistant U.S. Attorney Mac Jenkins stood before the judge. Your Honor, Mr. Talton is not a man of desperation. He is a man of immense intellect who chose to use his gifts to poison our economy. He treated the law as a technicality and the Secret Service as a rival engineering firm. This wasn't a crime of necessity. It was a crime of arrogance. The judge looked at Albert. Mr. Talton, you have had multiple opportunities to use your skills for the betterment of society. Instead, you created a perverted version of the American dream. You didn't build anything. You only imitated. Albert was sentenced to 9 years in federal prison. His co-conspirators received lesser sentences. But for Albert, the loss was total. The Aston Martin was towed and sold at a government auction. The Mercedes were repossessed by the banks. The 7 flat-screen TVs were hauled away. The house in Woodland Hills was foreclosed upon. The empire had been built on paper, and like paper, it had burned to ash at the first sign of heat. Chapter 11, The Ripple Effect. While Albert adjusted to the sterile confines of his cell, the ghosts of his H2 H3 notes continued to haunt the American economy. In a small grocery store in East LA, a woman named Maria stared at the $100 bill the bank had just returned to her. It had a black mark across Benjamin Franklin's face, the mark of the pen she had forgotten to use in the rush of a Friday evening. "I can't pay the distributor," she whispered to her son. "This was our profit for the week." The loss of $100 might be a rounding error for a corporation, but for Maria, it was the difference between a full shelf and an empty one. Albert's art was a tax on the poor, a silent thief that stole from those who could least afford it. Target, Macy's, and Walmart reported millions in losses, but they simply raised their prices, passing the cost of Albert's lifestyle onto every honest customer. The $7.2 million Albert had circulated wasn't just worthless money. It was a vacuum that sucked real value out of the pockets of millions of people. In the specimen vault, Kelly Harris continued to receive new old notes. They'll be in circulation for another decade, she told a trainee. Some are tucked in mattresses, some are in foreign exchanges. Talton didn't just print money, he printed a legacy of distrust that we have to scrub away, one bill at a time. Chapter 12, The Silent Partner. Allison Sewell sat in her living room in Woodland Hills, the silence of the house deafening. The flat-screen TVs were gone, leaving ghostly rectangular outlines on the walls where they had once hung. She remembered the way Albert used to talk about potential. He always felt like he was reaching for something just out of grasp. A life that didn't involve grease and grit. He wasn't a bad man, she told a friend over the phone, her voice trembling. He was just He was always calculating. He saw a bill and didn't see money. He saw a puzzle. He loved the puzzle more than he loved the money. But the money was what had kept the lights on. Now, the bank was calling. The repossessions were a slow-motion car crash that she couldn't look away from. Albert had built her a palace of sand, and the tide had finally come in. She visited him once a month. Behind the glass, he looked smaller, his eyes darting around the room as if analyzing the structural integrity of the partition. "I'm doing okay, Al," she lied. "I'll be out soon," he promised. "I'm already thinking about a way to build a consulting firm. Security, you know, they need people like me." Allison looked at him and saw the same spark she had seen when he first took apart that Bose speaker. He wasn't repentant. He was just recalibrating. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. Chapter 13, the chess game continues. David Goldberg sat in the prison yard, his back against a chain-link fence. He was serving a shorter sentence than Albert, but the boredom was a different kind of punishment. He thought about that first game of chess, the one where he had seen the money in the oven. He had known, even then, that the game was rigged. You can't play against the house and expect to keep your pieces. Al still thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, Goldberg told a fellow inmate. And he probably is, but in here, being smart doesn't get you an Aston Martin. It just gets you a slightly better job in the laundry room. Goldberg had confessed early, a tactical move to save himself. But he knew Albert didn't hold it against him. To Albert, confession was just another variable in the equation. "He's not done," Goldberg whispered to the wind. "A man like that, he doesn't stop. He just changes the medium." Chapter 14, the Ivory Tower of Steel. Prison life for Albert Talton was a series of engineering problems. He analyzed the caloric intake of the meals, the rotation of the guards, the blind spots in the security cameras. He didn't see a cage. He saw a system to be understood. He spent hours in the library, reading about blockchain, digital security, and the future of currency. The world was moving away from paper. and he was moving with it. Benjamin Franklin is a dinosaur. He wrote in a journal he kept hidden under his mattress. The next frontier isn't ink and newsprint. It's code. It's encryption. It's things you can't touch with a pen. He felt a strange sense of peace. The H to H38 operation had been a proof of concept. He had proven that he could defeat the U.S. Treasury with a consumer-grade printer. Now, he was preparing for the next version. He didn't miss the Mercedes. He didn't miss the flat screens. He missed the shick of the printer, the sound of a lie becoming a reality. Epilogue: the ink never dries. The artisan of ink had become a case study at the Secret Service Academy. New recruits were taught about the sandwich method and the Aquanet barrier. Albert Talbot's name was synonymous with the modern age of digital counterfeiting. But for Albert, the name didn't matter. In the dark of his cell, he closed his eyes and imagined a new kind of bill. It wasn't made of paper. It was made of light and numbers. It was a ghost that could move across the globe in a second, untouchable and untraceable. He opened his eyes and stared at the gray concrete wall. He picked up a pen-a-reel, government-issued ballpoint, and began to sketch. Not a bill, but a diagram, a map of a new world. The hustle wasn't over. It was just being rewritten, because for Albert Talton, the ink never truly dried. It just waited for the next page to turn. Author's note: this narrative is based on the real-life investigation of Albert Talton. While some dialogue and internal monologues have been dramatized for literary effect, the technical details of his counterfeiting operation and the impact on the economy are based on the historical record of the case.